welcome to the Producer Podcast. I'm your host, Micah Versman, and with me on the show today is Katherine Johnson. Katherine is the producer at Sheepshed Entertainment, a production studio that has produced a number of music videos and short films, including the film Bump, which took home the Sanctity of Life Award at the 2018 Christian Worldview Film Festival. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So everybody gets this question asked to them, but maybe briefly just talk a little bit how you got started in filmmaking.
Okay. I was determined to be a missionary doctor until I was 14. And in the course of about 9 months, I became utterly sick at the sight of blood. And decided to go from the medical field to filmmaking, the most logical progression you could possibly make. And at the end of that 9-month period, actually, I became perfectly fine with blood once again. It was just the strangest thing. It was like this little period of time where God was like, I have other plans for you. But anyway, so from 14 on, I got my first little digital camcorder. The immediate response to getting one was making narrative films. So that really never stopped. And then slowly just inched up and up. And from there, I had one contact when I used to live in Dallas, Fort Worth Metroplex. I had one friend in the film industry. And she contacted me one day and she said, oh, there's this Christian movie around the corner from your house and they're shooting and they need someone in the art department. And my first response was, I don't know how to draw. I can barely paint. Like, stick figures are awful when I do them. So I was really concerned. So I sent back this really long text message on my flip phone expressing all of my concerns. And she was like, no, they just no. And so I got my first internship on the film Hoovie. And that kind of kickstarted everything from there, so.
Nice. So, lately with a lot of the Sheepshed projects, you've been working more as a producer. Was that always kind of the position you navigated to? Because a lot of people, that's not the area of film you hear them wanting to pursue.
I think it was just a necessity, frankly. But it was a necessity born of, I don't know, I hate to say that I have natural AD skills, but the world of logistics and being a first AD and being a producer are very similar. Mm-hmm. And so it was an area that I could do without too much brain work. So I did end up, now I have more producer credits than I have director credits, which is not the way that I expected things to go, but I'm enjoying where it's taking me.
Nice. Yeah. No, we definitely need more producers out there. That's for sure.
Well, and I think also being on the flip side of the coin, as a director, where your brain is entirely tied up with creative space, and the producer is very little creative space, most of it's logistics, finding your way to support the director as best you can and be as encouraging and just building up the creative vision with the logistical framework that has to be there has its own rewards in a different way. So it's fun to serve other directors in that very needed way, because nobody just wakes up and says, I want to do the hardest job on set.
No, they do not. What led you to starting Sheepshed Entertainment?
So when I realized that directing was really the direction that I wanted to go, no pun intended, I realized that before someone hires you as a director, and I really knew nobody whatsoever in the film industry. And when I mean no one, I mean absolutely no one. And so I knew that I had to make things to show to people to say, no, look, I can do things and I have passion and I have talent and please hire me. So Sheepshed was born out of please hire me. And so the first short film that I did that's actually shown to the public is Treatment 42, and that was not produced under Sheepshed's name because I wasn't confident about choosing a brand and going down that path yet. So I produced it under the super stupid name of Team 7. Because it was all 7 family members and we were the only ones on the crew, so it worked. But that was probably a year or No, that was 3 years before we even went into production on Bump. And so in between producing Treatment 42 and Bump, there was this gradual, like, okay, this is what the brand we want. This is the name we want to stick with. This is where we want things to go in the future. And we chose entertainment because it's more ambiguous. It has a greater umbrella of creative projects that could be under it, not just film. So music, even books, live productions, all of that kind of couches under entertainment. So that's kind of why we decided to start it.
Cool. So is there a certain type of entertainment you've yet to work on that you still hope to?
I have personally acted in radio dramas. It's been years, but I've always had in the back of my mind that I would really like to do some audio dramas. So we'll see if that ever happens, but that is the one thing that's in the back of my mind that I think I would like to try that. I'd like to try producing that.
Yeah.
So
it'd be cool. I still enjoy radio dramas, so I would listen.
Yes. Yes, I do too.
On your Facebook page with Sheepshed, I've seen you a couple times do different script calls. When you do those, as kind of that producer mindset, what are you looking at when you're reading through these scripts and trying to decide which ones you want to pursue making?
So we've done it twice. So if we do it this year, it'll be our third annual script call. And so each year kind of has a different parameters that I'm looking at. I usually set aside, first of all, a number of days, like how many days I know that I'll be shooting in the fall. Within the framework of that amount of time that I know I'll have this many crew and this many cast in this one area, I'm really looking for scripts that, and it's just stories in general that resonate, but logistically that are simple. If they have few locations that are easier to find, an abandoned warehouse in Scandinavia with snow falling in the roof would be classified as difficult. A living room would, receive a huge thumbs up from a producer because you're just like, oh, a living room, perfect. I at least have options there. I have no options in Siberia. And talent, how many actors are needed, what kind of technical requirements does the film have? Is it all in one shot? Does it require drones or 100 extras or a riot? Just all the logistical things. When you choose a story as a producer, you have to resonate with it from the heart, because otherwise producing is just too hard and it won't ever see the screen, because you just have to care about it in some level as a story. So you have to find a story that you like, and then you have to find one that logistically makes sense for your resources in the given time period that you have to produce. Because as much as we all want to be able to take an entire day with only 3 pages on the call sheet, it's just not practical. So there's a balancing act there.
Once you have a script you're doing, how do you then break it down to figure out budget-wise how much maybe to go to craft services or gear rental, stuff like that?
Every short that we produce has a short-term goal and a long-term goal. So some of our shorts are the only reason we do them is to work on one specific technical skill, or to experience, for me as a director, Fruit Loot was, how do I direct 10 actors at once who are all on screen at the same time and none of them are ever off camera? So there's typically a reason why we're making a specific project from a technical or creative standpoint. So that element will always receive more attention. So if my goal is to shoot 2 or 3 short films in a week, and I typically will say one of them is going to be the showpiece. This is the one we're going to spend the time on, the resources on, and then there may be another 1 or 2 that I say, oh, that one's to practice a technical skill, or it's to practice comedy timing in the edit, or just with the pure focus of, I want to work with entirely new people. Let's do a film where I don't know anybody, but I'll get to make a lot of contacts and try new things. So kind of approaching every project from its specific goal then impacts how I break it down. Because if I am really valuing the technical side on a film, then that receives more attention. If I'm really looking at the storytelling side, like I just really want this story to impact people, then I also look at it differently. That's very technical. That's a really high overview of breaking down the script. But then from there, I look at, most importantly, how many days are we going to be on set? How many pages is the script? We typically, we have shot definitely more than 6 pages a day. I like to keep it at 5 pages a day. Okay. That's my dream. My dream is to keep each day at about 5 pages. So how many pages, how many days is it going to take? Are those scenes going to involve a lot of setups? So is it just 2 people at a coffee table, over the shoulder, and a wide, and you're done? Because that's fairly simple. And then maybe I could shoot 6 pages in one day. If it's that setup, I probably go through and look at cameras first and how the camera setups would be, and then how many actors there are, how many people would be involved on screen, and then how many people would be involved off screen. And depending on how long those days are, impacts, like you mentioned, crafty and meals. So if I can schedule it so that I can use all local crew and send everybody home and they can go eat, that's definitely a bonus for the budget of the film. I'd really have to think about this question. Okay. Because it just is different for every film. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of the stepping stone.
All right. You mentioned you sometimes shoot multiple projects in a week. Is that challenging, trying to get all the logistics in place for all of those at the same time, or not too bad?
Well, I would like to think that I've gotten better at it. So the first time that we shot 2 shorts together was after we had shot Bump. We shot Bump in 10 days, which was overly generous, but a lot of the crew didn't have as much experience under their belt. I had never led a production that big, and so we specifically scheduled 10 days to really give time. So for the Bump premiere, everyone was going to come back into town, and what do filmmakers do? They make movies. Yes. They don't just watch movies. So we scheduled The Boy Who Wanted to Burn the Barn and Bus Stop. We shot The Boy Who Wanted to Burn the Barn on Friday night. We premiered Bump on Saturday night, and then Sunday from noon to 7 p.m. we shot Bus Stop. And so that was the first time of shooting multiple projects at once. And those went actually incredibly well. They were, except for the fact that it was freezing cold, but it was very good. Logistically, it was very simple. We shot them both in less than 8 hours apiece. It was the same crew for both films. So that was really the simplest time that we attempted that. Every time after that, it has gotten more and more complicated. In general, we try to not schedule department heads in the same position for each film. So if we're doing 2 films, we say, okay, you will be the costume designer for this film, and then you will be the costume designer for this film. So it's 2 different people so that you only have one film that really occupies your department head space, in other words. So in general, I don't direct 2 films in a weekend. I have someone else direct one, and then I direct one. It does have its own level of confusion, but I've noticed that the more that we've been able to work with cast and crew who have several features on their resume, then they are able to grasp the chaos of day-to-day changing better than people who have only ever worked on 1 or 2 projects,
for sure,
spread out over the course of a year. The more experienced you are, I think the less you're thrown a curve by it. But I think as a producer, I've definitely learned logistically, like, oh, these are the things I should do if I'm doing shorts in a block. I should not schedule department heads together. There should be a rest day. There should really be this kind of meeting in the middle so that nobody gets off track, and etc. So, because lack of sleep is a thing. Yes. Because the problem is you finish the first film and you want to party. So you stay up really late and you eat lots of pizza and you're just like, this is great. And then the next day you have to start on another film. And so...
yeah, the struggles.
It's special.
So what differences, because you've done shorts and music videos, so what are some of the differences that come between producing a music video as opposed to a short film?
Not to be too obvious, but sound is a big piece of it, obviously, because you do not have to have a boom operator hovering over your subject when you're shooting a music video. So you're able to film in some ways much faster, at a faster pace, and accomplish more scenes and setups quickly, because if a motorcycle zooms down the street right by you, it's not going to make a difference as long as your actors don't react to it. So it's fun because you can laugh, you can react to, I mean, you don't want to laugh at the actors, but if something funny happens, if you're off camera, you can feel like you are an audience member, even as you're shooting live. So there's a special kind of inclusiveness that comes in a music video, whereas on a film set, I mean, if you breathe too loudly, everyone looks at you. So that has its unique challenges. Music videos are also, in general, more colorful. So even though you don't have sound, you have more time given to art in general, to the art department to set dress and just make things look really intentional all around. In the editing room, I think in post-production, they can be both a pain and super awesome because you have so many options of how to edit.
Yeah.
You know, even if you are shooting a narrative music video, you still have like, oh, we can cut back to this shot of just them singing here, or so you don't have some of the continuity issues. But then at the same time, you also think, why didn't we get XYZ? Because it's not a narrative. I mean, it is a narrative, but they're very different. Music videos and film is just very, very different.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So I thought I'd focus a little bit in on Bump, since that's a little bit bigger project you've done. And I know with Bump you did a Kickstarter for that. So was that Kickstarter for the whole production? Was that just for, because some people will just do it for whether it's the production aspect or their post-production budget. How did you kind of run your Kickstarter?
We set up the Kickstarter so that it would end within a week after we finished filming. So I put up the Kickstarter saying, look, we have enough money to film this. We are filming it. In fact, here are some pictures of us on set. Like, this is actually happening. So most of the funds that we raised, which I think it was $2,600 if I remember correctly, all went to post-production for the most part, / the art department. As we knew that the Kickstarter was going to succeed, we were able to spend a little bit more as we went along. I don't know. It's weird because we ran a Kickstarter. You know, most people say, we need money to finish or we need money to make. And I said, I'm making.
Yes.
Help me make it better. So, I don't know. It's in a special camp.
I mean, hey, that's cool, though, that you weren't having to rely on that campaign to even make the project.
But it did. I mean, it made an enormous difference. It enabled us also to pay a lot of festival fees so that we were able to get a broader audience early on, because we were able to submit to a little bit wider of a range than I would have previously anticipated. And like I said, we were able to spend more on post-production and art specifically, because I did write a world where all of the girls had to have costumes made from scratch. Which was great. Totally great.
Doing the Kickstarter, was there anything you learned, either maybe something you thought was gonna help generate funds and then it didn't work at all, or something that you didn't think was gonna work and it ended up being really popular?
This may have changed because our campaign was now 3 or 4 years ago. But at the time, I did not know this at the time of the campaign, but you could pledge X amount, and then you could actually go back in before the campaign ended and lower how much it was. So we did have a situation where I did my video like, yay, we've reached our stretch goal. Here's stretch goal number 2. And one of our donors went in who was at the highest level and halved their donation. So it was unexpected. It wasn't, I mean, it didn't make or break anything, but it did make me think like, good grief, I just did this video about the stretch goal and now it's on here and yet you could see that we're not even at the stretch goal. So it was a little bizarre. Like it was just, okay. So that was definitely a learning curve because like I said, it was from the highest level to not to half of what the highest level was, which was still very generous and we were very thankful for it. But as far as how it looked to the public, it was strange because then there I am saying, we've reached the stretch goal and waving my victory flag and we hadn't. I did think after that moment that I would like to go in and really read the rules a little bit better because I didn't even know you could do that. And also not to maybe celebrate so soon. I don't know, because then at the same time, you're like, you really need to get your stretch goal videos done and yes. I don't know. That was just, it was a huge learning experience. I watched and read a lot of other Kickstarter campaigns and I found a lot of success with the making 2 tiers where they're identical, but there's one that's cheaper and it's limited. So it'd be like, this one's $40 and you get all the perks of this one, but this one's $50, but there's only X amount of the $40 one, so jump in quick. That worked really, really well for us. So I would do that again, for sure. Because it just gives people the incentive to do it now and not wait. Like, just do it now and you get all the perks. So that was our most popular level by far. Like, it pretty much swept a lot of our total. So
cool. Yeah, I've never thought of doing something like that for the ones I've been involved with, so I'll have to keep that in mind.
It was really good. I stole the idea from some kids in the UK who had a really great Kickstarter.
I'm sure we've all done stuff like that.
Yes.
So, you mentioned the wardrobe that you kind of ended up having to create for the film. So Bump has a very unique look and feel to it. So what was the pre-production process like in getting all those, from costumes to props and locations, together for that film?
Starting with wardrobe, Morgan Willer just did an absolutely phenomenal job. So I was blessed to have her and Bree Milkey, production designer, and our script supervisor, Hannah Woods. They all are quite accomplished seamstresses. So very early on in pre-production, I did a conference call with the 3 of them and just said, hey, could you guys all please make some smocks? And so Morgan did up this great drawing and sent it off. And so across the country in Arkansas, Colorado, and Florida, they were each making costumes, and they all brought them with them when they arrived. And so it worked out really well because they all had slightly different material and they used slightly different patterns, and so it kind of gave it both a uniform look but also a natural, slightly different look. It worked out really, really well. And then I did a lot of shopping. A lot of shopping myself in town. So I collected a bunch of stuff before they arrived. They all brought things with them, and then we did a bunch of wardrobe fittings, and somehow everyone ended up looking great. All thanks to Morgan. All thanks to Morgan. The locations were an absolute pain. I think I stand with producers everywhere. I could have it printed on a shirt like, as a producer, I hate locations. I don't know. As a producer, I need locations. Maybe that's even better. Like I said again, I dug myself into a hole because in the world of Bump, they're supposed to be in the future, but yet technology was supposed to have been wiped out, so I couldn't see any cars, absolutely no cars. Even power lines were like a little bit on the edge of, So trying to find locations where you weren't going to see any cars was just like a nightmare.
I bet.
An absolute nightmare. We had some churches that actually owned some homes in town, and so they donated them for our use for that week, and it was great because they were mostly empty, so we could come in, move everything around, set dress exactly the way we wanted, and then disappear, and come back a few days later and build it all back up again. And so that was just really generous. I've never had an experience like Bump since where I actually did not end up having to pay anything for any of the locations. They were all donated to the film, which was such a blessing. I mean, you just can't even describe the thankfulness that I have to the individuals who were so generous.
With the locations, because some of them are a little more run down looking, and was there ever any like safety concerns or anything that you guys were having to watch out for?
At the very end of the movie, there is a very run down mill that we were shooting at, and if I remember correctly, we did have to sweep the ground for like screws and nails because it was all supposed to be a oneer where they come around the corner and they run across, and you're just thinking, good grief. So we didn't actually have any problems. We also shot on the edge of a pretty rocky drop-off, and there was one instance that was not ideal, but then after that, everyone was very obliging to be wise and safe.
That's good to hear.
Yes. But it was, yeah, and we shot in the woods a lot, so, there's always a risk of poison ivy and snakes, and everything that could go wrong usually goes wrong on a film set, and we were very blessed.
Good to hear. I noticed watching, because I rewatched Bump before the interview here to kind of refresh my memory, but you wrote, directed, and produced the film.
Yes.
Was that just kind of out of necessity that you did all three? And is that something you would do again, or do you hope in the future to stick to either like the writing and the directing, or just the producing for projects?
At this point, I am more accepting of my producer fate. So ideally, I didn't have a production manager on Bump, and so ideally on a future project, I would prefer for all of my brain space to just be dedicated to directing or writing, mostly directing, but I would not be turned off by the prospect of having to produce again. But I think it would be absolutely necessary to have a team that is specifically supporting the logistical side, because I was the only really logistical hand holding up Bump, and that was too much. Like, it was just flat out too much. So yeah, I'm not doing that again. But the idea of producing and having like a UPM or anybody to help with some of that would be, some of the office work specifically would be a treat. I might actually like producing at that point.
How did you manage dealing with a bigger crew on the film? Because obviously that film had a lot more crew and then quite a few more cast than a lot of the other projects you've done. So how did you handle going and suddenly having that larger group to direct?
The on-camera side felt incredibly natural because in some ways you're talking to people and telling them how to match what you've created in your head. So the cast was fairly straightforward because you already have a plan for that. Like, that's concrete. You come here, you do this. This is how everything flows. The crew, Jordan Huback was my first AD, and he did a great job of keeping everyone on track. So, yeah. For such a, at the time, inexperienced crew, their resumes have all like quadrupled in the last 3 years, so which shows that they all have just such talent, and so there wasn't a lot of management to be done, because pretty much every time I turned around, people were doing their job. In fact, sometimes made me feel like I wasn't doing enough, because there they were working and sewing and building curtains, and everything else. So the crew side, having a strong first AD helps, obviously, tremendously. But then beyond that, being intentional in selecting a group of people that I knew would do their jobs well, but also work really well together as a unit, pretty much made my job way easier because they just self-existed in excellence.
Do you have any tips when it comes to selecting crew to help bring together a crew that's going to work well together? Because I've definitely seen sets that the crew could not work well together, and then others where it was like the dream team you always would want.
Some of it I don't think you can plan for as a, in leadership. Like, you just can't know how everyone's going to get along in a specific instance. But I tend to try to listen to people. If I don't know them, then I typically interview them before they come on set. So trying to get to know them as a person and how they interact with trouble on set, and just kind of getting an idea for them as a person and as a personality. And so I kind of view it as a jigsaw puzzle of people I know really well, and then new people coming in on the team, and even down to like who should be roommates. I try to give really close attention to every single detail, just based on, okay, what do I know about these people? How do I know they operate? Are they night owls? Because you have two people that could be best friends, but if they're first time meeting each other, one likes to get up at 5 a.m. for a 7 a.m. call time. The other one likes to get up at 6:45 a.m. for their 7 o'clock call time. Like, those two people are not going to get along very well. So I try to get to know people on a personal level, even if I'm just interviewing them from a professional position, and then try to figure out who is the best person for the job, and then how will these independent departments work together. And then in a big picture, how do you foster as a leader just the brotherly love of Christ? And we are all different. We are all seeking to accomplish the same goal. We are sometimes very frustrated with each other, like extremely frustrated. But how can I as leadership model how we get along, how we work through difficulties, how we talk through things, and not just let things pile up into the pile of, I am so angry at you, I can't look at you. So yeah, I think you should know your crew and your cast. At least make an effort to know them personally, and then use that knowledge to try to figure out, how would these people fit? And then the rest of it is not up to you at all. So
That's some good advice. So what is something maybe that you wish you would have known then that you know now?
That art department is not about drawing. To be totally real. That would have really calmed me down. On my first few features, and this is just normal human nature, where you think everybody is looking at me. Everybody is looking at me all the time. Like, I'm on set, everybody is going to be able to look at me and know that I don't know what I'm doing, or that this is my very first time, or I've only been on set 12 hours and don't know anybody. What do I do? So I spent a lot of time on my first feature trying to be as out of the way as possible. But the problem was that meant miles from set. Now, granted, I was on walkie, so I was always doing my job. But if there was okay, we're rolling, there's always a normal little lull during that time, and I would just get myself as far away as possible, and as a result, I did not get to observe as much, because I was too concerned with not being in anyone's way that there was no way they even knew where I was. So besides oh yeah, that's her way over there. So if I wish I could have reassured myself with the simple words that the camera cannot see you if you're standing behind the camera. Which sounds incredibly logical, but when you are scared stiff that you're going to mess up in front of some big time producer or director or first AD, then just to be reminded that, hey, don't make noise, but as long as you're not in front of the lens, you really are fine. Because traffic patterns of grips, if you're in the way of a grip, they're going to let you know.
That is
and you
true.
will either be impaled or you will no longer be there. So there's really almost no way that you could be in the way and then not be told that you were in the way. So that would be the most reassuring thing I could tell myself if I could go back.
All right. Have you found any good books or podcasts, YouTube channels that you try to follow that give good educational material to help you, especially when something like a quarantine's going on and you can't be learning on set and you want to keep expanding your knowledge?
I have been reading through I'll Be in My Trailer, which I say is the best book on directing I've ever read. It's not even just for directing. I think even as a producer, even as a first AD, like kind of all of the how to manage talent, how to manage your crew, some of those general leadership things apply to everyone, not just a director talking to cast. So that book is just pretty much hands down the best resource that I've been reading.
Nice.
I've also been reading some other stuff, but I'm not as into podcasts
Okay.
or YouTube videos. I should be, but most of my time on YouTube is spent, how do you fix this in Final Cut Pro? Or how do you get the little red dot to go away in DaVinci? That's my use of YouTube to help me as a filmmaker. So most of the time I just read books. And I read a lot. I read a lot of articles. A lot of articles from just all over about everything from how this specific light fixture is better for interviews to, what are SAG's current rules during COVID?
Yeah.
I'm reading it all.
I have those saved. I still need to read all their rules, which will constantly be changing anyway, but...
Yes, they are. I like to look into, if I do any self-educational things, I like to look at state film commissions.
Okay.
And kind of delve into what are they producing right now and what are the laws in different states, regarding filming, and how are the markets growing and changing and evolving in all the little pockets that are, now not just Hollywood, everywhere else. And I like to watch movies. I like to find old movies. Pretty much everything I watch is made before 1960. Easy. And so I like to watch good movies for educational purposes and entertainment purposes.
Nice. Yeah, I don't watch enough of the old classic movies myself. I probably should, but...
It's such a good lesson, I think, especially as a Christian filmmaker, because I believe Code dropped in 56. So everything made between 1934 and 56, I believe, is made within a very strict structure. And it's fascinating to me that they made so many amazing World War II movies within such, quote, according to a modern worldview, such limited options, no cussing and no blood and no whatever, and yet you're bawling your eyes out at these top A-list actors who are able to deliver a war story or a crime story or a just heartbreaking story of any kind, or comedy, and all without filth. And so even though it may not even be within a Christian worldview, it still is typically made within a framework of this is what society finds to be morally uplifting and right and true. And so, I don't know. I really like old movies. But for that reason, because they're able to make you cry with, or feel things or think critically without any filth. I love it. I just love it. You don't need clear play.
That's for sure. Do you have like 2 or 3 that are your top favorite that you would always recommend to people?
I would say Gentleman's Agreement with Gregory Peck. It deals with the racism against Jews after the war, and it is absolutely phenomenal. Just gets really to the heart and the sin issue of how we are selfish and we like to think that we're better than everyone else. So Gentleman's Agreement. Bringing Up Baby is a comedy. If you haven't seen it, you're missing out. I would say those are my 2 top.
Okay.
Besides, like, getting into musicals with, like, Singing in the Rain. But start with Bringing Up Baby and Gentleman's Agreement.
Sounds good. So one final question I have is, what's one piece of advice you would give to somebody that's just getting started, whether they just like finished their first major project where they actually had a crew and a budget and stuff, or they're just getting ready to do that?
Well, if someone is about to make something, I will celebrate with them. You can do it. If someone has just finished something, yay, you did it. There's a huge, like, grace and just joyous celebration with each other because it's such a hard task to make film. So I would say on the one hand, I would reassure, like, yes, this is really hard. Everything is going to go wrong. You may shoot the whole movie and the power goes out and your hard drive dies. Oh, bummer. I mean, like, everything is going to go wrong. But then with that slice of encouragement, I would say ground yourself in why you're making your movie, because ultimately eternity is not going to, we're not going to look back in eternity and say, oh man, that movie really changed my life or changed the world. We're called to be obedient. We're called to follow Christ, to act Christ-like in all situations. So it's more when everything is falling apart around you, how can you react in such a way that will give God glory, even if that means, my whole project is dead. So, because God is just way more interested in your heart than anything that you put on screen, because he doesn't need anything but our obedience. So, on the I think that's what I would say. Everything's going to go wrong. Focus on Christ, because that is everlasting. Your soul is what's going to last, but your film is just going to be a piece of straw. So, that does not sound encouraging, but oh well.
It doesn't, but it's so true. Like, I've definitely had projects like that, or you even look back and what was the biggest thing in your life at the time. Now you're almost embarrassed to show it to anybody.
Yes. People can like, oh, it's my baby. Well, it's, if you've written it, especially produced it or directed it, one of those 3, like it's like your it really is like your brainchild, because you've said this originated, if it's story-wise, like within me. I saw it all the way through completion, whether or not it fits what was in your head originally. Like, this is still a finished project. So my typical advice to people who have not made a film is just please make a film. And then my advice, if you've made a film, is please make another film. Because if you get too stuck in the embarrassment or the oh no, or it just took too much work, like, if you really want to be a filmmaker, just produce. Like, just flat out produce. And what I do is I tend to make every 3rd project is one I actually care about. So I make 2 projects that are to practice something technical or just to work on something, whatever that something is. I pick something and I'm like, I need to work on this as a director or as an actor, or as a writer, as whatever. I'm going to do that. I'm going to practice that. And then I make one that I really care about. And I'm very much, sometimes I feel alone on that little hill of just make lots of films. But my point is not to make lots of films. It's that you should be progressing. And sometimes progressing looks like, oh, that movie was not as good as the last one. But as you continue making them, then you see your ladder stepping up, and it's not just like...
Yes. I think those are some good thoughts to end on. So thank you very much for taking the time to come on and talk tonight.
Of course. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Until next time, make sure to subscribe to the Producer Podcast, and thanks for listening.